Alright, so this video is going to be all about human factors. We will be covering the whole first concept of SRM or Single Pilot Resource Management. I am talking about ADM or Aeronautical Decision Making. That, as you can see, it is a fairly long topic to talk about. Originally, I divided ADM into 4 videos for a more bite-sized format. You can find all those shorter videos in the description of this video or by clicking over here in the screen right now. So this very long ass video is the compilation of all those 4 shorter videos, so that if you really want to dive deep into ADM, you can do it without any interruption. Hi, my name is Jorge Muñoz. I'm a senior instructor pilot working in El Salvador, and as this video covers pretty much the whole damn thing about aeronautical decision making, you can imagine that we will be talking about a lot of stuffs like the main idea behind human factors, CRM and SRM. What is ADM, self-assessment, hazardous attitudes, self-critiques, and more. So, as always, I will leave here on the screen the timestamps for each specific section of this video, and also you can find the timestamps linked in the description of this video and also in a pinned comment down below, so you can find in an easier way what you are looking for. I know this is a pretty long video. With nothing more to say, let's begin with the first video about human factors. Alright, so today we're going to talk about human factors. We're going to be talking about crew resource management, SRM, and all the other concepts that it includes. This whole concept of human factors inside aviation started because airlines started to notice that the vast majority of accidents were human related. That means the pilot, the crew, or someone else was responsible for the accident. It was almost never fault of the machine, aka the airplane. Due to this, the terms CRM and SRM were created. SRM stands for Single Pilot Resource Management and CRM stands for Crew Resource Management. These are 2 concepts that you will hear a lot when you're talking about human factors. For now, we will talk about SRM, which basically is a training that the airline teaches to the pilots and the whole flight crew in order to prepare them to recognize and eliminate, or at least minimize, possible dangers before, during, and after the flight. When we talk about SRM, this means that the whole flight crew should be able to use hardware information and themselves as well as other people to their own advantage with the purpose of making the flight as safe as possible. To explain this a little bit more, with hardware I mean the airplane, the systems of the airplane, and anything that the airplane can carry inside that can help to prevent a possible danger. With information, I mean that specific data for that specific flight. And when I say that you have to use yourself and use other people around you, that means that everyone, literally almost everyone, have something that they can contribute to the flight. The dispatchers of your flight, your maintenance team, weather briefers, air traffic controllers, and even your passengers can help. With the help of all of them, you can get the information that you need in order to see the whole picture of the situation and make an effective decision when everyone needs it the most. Remember that SRM is a responsibility of everyone, not just for the pilots or not just for the flight attendants. All of you must act like a team before, during, and after the flight, because the flight does not start when you take off and finish when you land. Now, we will see the 6 concepts that SRM includes. First, we have ADM or Aeronautical Decision Making. We have risk management, task management, situational awareness, 5. CFIT or controlled flight into terrain, and 6. And finally, we have automation management. Okay, so ADM, or again Aeronautical Decision Making, is a systematic, mental process that us as pilots have to constantly use in order to determine the best action for a certain circumstance. Just to put a quick example, if the engine fails, the pilot immediately knows what to do. In other words, ADM means that you have to make a decision, but it is a decision based on logic, your experience, and your own knowledge. It is a well thought out decision that you have been trained in order to recognize that you have to make a decision in the first place. Because if anything happens to the airplane or to the flight and nobody even notices it, that's it. You have to recognize first that you have to make a decision. With that said, when you recognize that you have to make a decision, you judge the circumstances and the decision, and you execute it in a matter of seconds. Or if you have enough time, you execute it in a matter of minutes. It doesn't matter the situation that you're in, you will always have a timer to make a choice. So you must learn how to use your time effectively during the flight. Because you have no control of your time, you can only learn to manage it. On two general kind of situations: emergencies or the rest of the flight. During emergencies, you will have to use a naturalistic response, or what we call an automatic decision making. Hear me out, not aeronautical decision making, no, automatic decision making. A slight variation into the ADM acronym. The concept's naturalistic response or automatic decision making means that because it is an emergency, you have no time to make a plan from scratch. You need to respond immediately by using the established procedures that you have been practicing since the very beginning of your training. For example, the engine failure during takeoff. But for the second case, I mean the rest of the flight, we have all the rest of possible situations that we might encounter during the flight. And most probably they don't need an immediate response. We can stop for a moment and think what we want to do. For example, a loss of power during the cruise flight. We have a considerable amount of time to recognize that something has happened and plan what we are going to do in order to counter it. We can make an analytical decision with all the information that we have to our disposal. We can even think and consider different outcomes for the flight, depending on the decisions that we make. To take an analytical response to these situations, the ADM process uses a list of steps that we have to think of in order to make the best possible decision. And to make the best possible decisions, we, as pilots, use a variety of acronyms that help us remember, in an easier way, what we have to do during these situations of possible higher than normal stress. Because when we start thinking in the middle of the heat of the moment, it is possible for us to forget a step or two of the ADM process. I mean, during a stressful situation, a natural response of the brain could be, "Oh my god, we're in an emergency, what the hell do we do?" So that kind of reactions is what we are trying to prevent with an acronym like DECIDE, which stands for Detect, Estimate, Choose, Identify, Do, and Evaluate. Now, for this video, I'm going to put ourselves in this situation, because I think it's one of the easiest ways to understand exactly how this ADM process works. Let's say that we are in the middle of our flight. We are flying a multi-engine airplane. We have enough altitude in case anything happens and everything seems to be going alright. And suddenly one of our two engines fail, but we don't know that yet. Because someone has to be the first one to notice it. So here's when DECIDE comes into action. The letter D stands for detect. So when the engine fails, we start noticing that something is not quite alright. We start noticing that the airplane kinda sounds a little bit different. We detect that the sound coming out from the airplane's engines is different all of a sudden. After all, just one engine is working and it sounds different. Some of our parameters start reading different. And because of that, now we look to our engine and we notice that it has stopped working. The second letter stands for estimate. Now that we know that one of our engines is not working, we need to define how necessary it is for us to fix this change or this problem. Okay, so you think, I know that I am flying a multi-engine airplane, therefore I still have one engine left. All of the parameters from the working engine seems to be alright. And luckily I am near to an airport where I can land and have my airplane checked. Because of all of those things that now I know, I can estimate that this engine failure is not an emergency. But I shouldn't continue this flight because I am still way too far from my destination. Even though I know that my airplane can perfectly continue the flight and even gain more altitude if needed with just one engine. But why take the risk? So here it comes the third step of decide. Choose. I will choose how I want this flight to end. In this case, I choose to land my airplane safely in the nearby airport, with just one engine working. And here I will have my airplane checked because I already know that this airport has the facilities to do it. After that it comes the identify step, where I had to decide which actions are going to help me to succeed on what I want to do, in this case land the airplane in the nearby airport. For example, now that I have decided that I'm going to land this airplane in this said airport, how am I gonna do it? Am I going to try to restart the engine before landing? Or should I continue like this? Do I even have enough fuel to reach this airport? Or am I still too heavy to land this airplane? How do I contact the ATC of that airport to tell them my situation and what I want to do? How do I tell them to let me land on their airport? You have to identify all that in order to get the result that you chose before. By now we are reaching the fifth step of decide. Do. You have to do the necessary actions in order to adapt and overcome the changes or the problems that you are dealing with. You have to do the action to solve the problem. So let's say that because I have enough time and enough altitude, even though I'm going to land at this nearby airport, I am trying to restart my engine that has just failed. And with this we have come to the last step of decide. Evaluate. You have to evaluate the effects of the actions that you have made. So I said I'm going to try to restart the airplane's engine, but that didn't work at all. So I have evaluated that what I tried to do with my engine has not worked. And therefore I decided to land my airplane with just one engine working. And we managed to land the airplane safely. So now I can evaluate that the action of landing the airplane actually worked. And now I can have my engine checked. So wrapping up all this, in this video we talked about SRM and the 6 concepts it includes. And we have just talked about the first one, ADM, Aeronautical Decision Making, the mental process for taking decisions, and how this DECIDE acronym can help us to make those decisions. Before we continue with self-assessment, I wanted to mention that if you want to become an outstanding private pilot, if you are curious and you want to prepare yourself in the best possible way for all the tests to come, or even if you are an advanced pilot who wants to remember and perfect the basis of the BFR world, or maybe you want to start your private pilot training with a heads up over the others, I highly recommend you should check out my book Essential Knowledge for Private Pilot. You will find the link of the book in the description of this video. It is an Amazon Kindle exclusive. This book uses the 2 most effective study techniques in the whole world, active recall and spaced repetition, and it applies them into aviation. If that sounds good to you, then please go check out the book down below. You will be helping me a lot with this channel. The book is available in English as well in Spanish. Remember, you shouldn't be studying hard, you should be studying effectively, and with this book you can do just that. That was just a little plug. So now let's continue with self-assessment. I'm sorry if the camera seems a bit strange. I was playing around with it and messed it up for today's video. So now we will be breaking down what self-assessment is. During the last video we talked a lot about how you can evaluate every aspect of the flight. in order to make it as safe as it can be. How you, as a pilot, can even determine how other people might be a resource for you, with the purpose of making an effective decision. In addition to that, every time you're going to fly, you have to determine if the airplane is airworthy. By now you have took control of all that, right? You have took control of every factor and every aspect of the flight, right? Well, there's actually one thing that is yet missing, that is yet to be evaluated, and that's yourself. Just as you evaluate every other aspect of the flight each time you're going to fly, you must evaluate your own well-being, your own fitness, your own health, as well as your levels of fatigue for that specific flight. Because these factors can be caused or altered by external factors of your life. That doesn't necessarily have to do with your pilot life. Some of them can have a big impact on your ability to fly properly. And this is without saying that you have to be aware of your own personal skills, experience and knowledge are good enough for that specific flight. What I mean by this is that, for example, you should know just by common sense that even if there is someone offering you to fly for them, because they have this multi-engine airplane and they want just these ones to take them to a somewhat nearby airport, when you just have gotten your private pilot license with a single engine airplane, even though they are inviting you to do this, maybe they will even pay you for doing this. But you internally know that your knowledge and your skills are not good enough for that flight. Yet. They will be at some point, but not right now. You will be putting everyone's life on the airplane to the line, including yours. Yes, you have to be confident in yourself when acting like a pilot in command, but you have to know your own limitations. But putting this that I have just said to the side, once you are sure that in theory you are qualified to do this flight, you have to ask yourself if your fitness for that flight is also alright, and here is where the I'm safe checklist comes in. Similar to the decide checklist that we saw in the previous video, this one is also a series of steps or questions that you have to ask yourself in order to determine if you are mental and physically ready for that flight. So, the I'm safe checklist stands for illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, eating, and emotion. As you can see, the letter E stands for two words, eating and emotion. So let's start with the first question. Illness. Do I have any symptoms of any kind of sickness? That's what you should be asking to yourself. This is an all-time question, not just for today's world, with this virus laying around. But any sickness has the potential to make your proficiency as pilot decrease. Even something so simple as a cold will not allow you to operate at your maximum best as a pilot. So, if you're sick, it will be better for you not to fly that day. Second question. Medication. Have I been taking any kind of prescribed drugs or medications that might alter or change the way I normally behave, even in the slightest? That's the question for you. And for this particular question, I recommend that your doctor should know that you're a pilot. That way he can be even more aware of what he is prescribing to you. But just for you to have an idea, that should make your body work at a slower than normal rate, will definitely be something that will not allow you to perform at your absolute best. The third word in the checklist is stress. Am I under higher than normal pressure because of my job? Maybe my family is falling apart or someone in my family is very sick. Am I stressed out or over worried because of my financial problems? Maybe the rent of my house or the tires of my car that I have yet to buy, or else my car will just not move anywhere. Or maybe are the worries of my own health what is causing me this shakiness in my hands. We all have problems of some sort. That's just how life is. Life will never be perfect for no one. And that's okay, we all deal with the problems in our own different ways. But taking those problems into the cockpit is where the danger begins. A pilot under these circumstances has to refuse to fly. for his own good and for the others. Explain what is happening in your life. Fix what you have to fix and then come back to the airport. A life of someone like a pilot has to be as relaxed as possible. Of course, that is easier said than done. I want to make clear that with this I don't mean that something like my phone stopped working because I dropped it. Therefore I'm stressed, therefore I cannot fly. No, okay? That is part of your everyday life. I'm talking about something that is really shaking your world and forces you to constantly be thinking about it all day. Question number 4. Alcohol. Have I been drinking during the last 8 hours? No? Maybe what about the last 24 hours? This question doesn't need to be explained that hard, I think. Alcohol makes us lose our senses. Our thoughts become slower and also our reaction time decrease. And even small doses that you may think you're totally fine with, you are not operating to your absolute best. Therefore, what if an emergency happens? Even if with the alcohol inside our bodies we'll still know what to do, those extra seconds that will take us to identify, think and respond might just be the difference between life and death for us. Number 5. Fatigue. Am I tired or not well rested? It's a no-brainer. Attention and effectiveness decreases as we are tired or sleepy. I'm sure that everyone has been tired after spending your whole night studying for an important exam, or watching Netflix. This sensation of fatigue or tiredness is something that we all can relate to. At some point during our life we all have been fatigued or tired. It is fairly common, but it's not ideal for pilots to constantly spend our days exhausted. You know what? That's not ideal for anyone. That tiredness sensation will not allow you to go through your day as you should. You will just not be giving the best of yourself at anything you do. Go rest when your body and your mind needs it. Don't feel guilty for needing a little rest. Cut short some activities so you can recover yourself. Just don't oversleep. Rest what you must and continue with what you have to do. Question number 6. Eating. Am I well nourished or am I just fat? Or maybe too skinny? Sometimes we skip meals because of the lack of time. Eating is absolutely necessary for doing any physical heavy activity and also to fly. If you're hungry, you will lose focus. If you're feeling weak, you will be performing weak in the airplane. It can divide your concentration, and on extreme cases you can faint mid-flight. It's another no-brainer question. Eat what you need to eat in order to stay healthy. And to finish up, number 7. Emotion. The second question with the letter E. Have I recently experienced any really strong event in my life? Something emotionally upsetting, maybe. Maybe I broke up with my fiancé days before the wedding. A friend of mine just died. Someone robbed my house. Or my pet is missing for 1 week by now. All these are very strong events to talk about. But they can happen in our lives. They will happen at some point, even if that sounds terrible. But emotion plays a really important part in our lives. If your emotions are not in line, your mind will constantly be getting lost in thought during the flight. So, once again, wait. Wait the time you need in order to get your emotions in line. So, wrapping up, self-assessment is the own evaluation that we make to ourselves to make sure that we are capable to properly perform that flight. That means theoretically, skill-wise and experience-wise, and of course physical and mental-wise. And if you notice that something is not quite alright during the I'm safe checklist, stop yourself and fix what you have to fix before go flying. But if you are not sick, you don't need of any medication, you are not over stressed out, you have not been drinking alcohol during the last couple of days, you are not overly fatigued, you are eating okay and you are emotionally stable, then congratulations, we can all go flying happily together. Up? No plug this time. You should have already bought the book. So let's continue with hazardous attitudes. Alright, so today we're going to talk about hazardous attitudes into the aeronautical decision making. For today we're going to be wrapping up the aeronautical decision making with the 5 possible hazardous attitudes that pilots can experience themselves that can interfere with our capacity of making effective decisions. Hazardous attitudes. What exactly are hazardous attitudes? Well, it is a behavior that can put ourselves in danger as well as the people around us. Now, when it comes down to us pilots, we have already determined that before and during each flight we should ask ourselves the decide and unsafe checklist, like a way or an insurance to ourselves that we are in good physical and mental condition, and that we can effectively take actions mid-flight, besides making sure that our knowledge and experience is adequate for that specific flight. But besides all that, another thing that we have to think of before and during each flight is our attitude, because it can affect the quality of our decisions. But how or when can the attitude of a pilot become dangerous for himself and for the flight? Well, a hazardous attitude for a pilot would be a behavior that makes him act in a way out of the normal for him, that makes him do something that he shouldn't be doing. And those dangerous behaviors are classified with 5 different names, depending on which bad attitude that pilot is experiencing. Other important thing to notice is that these attitudes can affect any pilot at any moment, of any age, of any experience, of any gender in any part of the world. Literally, we are all exposed to experience some of these bad attitudes at any point during our career. The other thing that is very alarming about this is that we are the ones experiencing these attitudes. This means that it can be very difficult for us to even notice that we are experiencing these bad attitudes. They can pass by unnoticed very easy. That's why we should be actively thinking about absolutely every possible factor during the flight, even our behavior. The 5 hazardous attitudes a pilot can experience are anti-authority, impulsivity, invulnerability, macho, and resignation. The first one is anti-authority. Their slogan is, "Don't tell me what to do." This happens when a pilot thinks that he knows everything. No one, but absolutely no one knows more than him. No one is right but him. Even the procedures and rules are wrong if he says so. If your instructor or someone older than you or with more experience than you is having this kind of attitude, don't be afraid to tell them something like, "But the procedure says that's not how you do that. We should follow what the rule says, don't you think?" Or something along those lines. Like you want to be polite with them because you know they are older or with more experience, but you have to stand your ground and say what you think is correct. Find the way to politely make them understand that they are being anti-authority. Maybe they haven't even noticed it. A good way to make sure that you are not falling into this attitude is to be aware that you should be following the rules, don't you? I mean, they are usually right and they are there for a reason. The second attitude is impulsivity. Their slogan is, "Do it quickly." We all have flown with someone that likes the things to be done as quickly as possible, putting extra pressure on the pilot that is over there with him in the cabin. Or maybe if you're an instructor, you have been that person. Maybe because you have a very busy schedule ahead of you, with all that students and their flight hours, or somebody is rushing you to meet their own schedule. But right now you can only do 1 flight hour at a time. So cool down a bit and focus on the quality of that flight hour that you are giving to your student. Also, if the person that is next to you is the one in a hurry, don't make them screw your workflow over there on the airplane. If you're sure that you're doing a good pace, Because someone with an impulsivity attitude is just not focused on choosing the best possible option for a certain problem. They just want to act as fast as possible. Think first, use the checklist, and so on. Third one, invulnerability. Their slogan is, "It won't happen to me." As you can imagine, when you have this attitude, you think that you are the exception to the rule, the only one, the untouchable, the luckiest pilot alive, just because you think that you can get away with things that you shouldn't be doing. But you do them anyway, because accidents only happen to other people, right? Never to you, just because you are you. And this attitude can be very present in our everyday life. On something like turning your car where it's prohibited. You do it every day even though you know that a lot of other cars have had crashes over there because of that. But you keep doing it because you have convinced yourself that it won't happen to you. Being confident in yourself is good, don't get me wrong. But that's just not confidence, that's just recklessness. Because you are counting on other factors besides you to succeed on what you are doing. And so the antidote for this attitude is very simple. Tell yourself it could actually happen to you. Luck doesn't last forever. The next attitude is macho, and their slogan is, "I can do it." This one is a little bit similar to the impulsivity, in the sense that you take unnecessary risks. But with the macho attitude, you take those risks because you feel like you have to prove something to someone else. Like for some reason you feel that you have to prove that you are the absolute best pilot. So if you know that, oh, my friend did that crazy thing with the airplane that he shouldn't be doing. Okay, then with a macho attitude you will be like, you know what, I can do that crazy thing even better. If you landed the airplane in 50 meters, then I can land it in 40 meters. You get the point. This macho attitude basically turns everything into a competition. And of course you want to prove that you are the best of all in that competition. But hey, dude, aviation is not a competition. Aviation is a career. You have to be professional, and these attitudes are not professional at all. So the antidote for this macho attitude is convincing yourself and being absolutely sure that taking risk is dumb. Taking chances is foolish. You don't need to do that. You are not going to be any better of a pilot if you do something crazy in the airplane. Like, yeah, you will be the talk of your friends for like 2 minutes, and after that nobody cares. I think that this one, the macho attitude, is one of the dumbest attitudes of the 5 that I'm talking about. Because for this one, it's like kinda you are forcing yourself to do things just to prove other people that you are better than them. And the final one, the 5th one, resignation. The slogan for this final attitude is, what's the purpose of doing that? You have a resignation attitude if you feel that anything, no matter what you do, you are not going to change the outcome of the flight. Like, I'm not talking about like for an emergency or something like that. Just the flight in general. Thinking something like, oh, if I disappear from this cabin, the flight will be exactly the same. Like, I don't even know what I'm flying. The plane's gotta do what it has to do and I'm here just for the ride. You feel and you think that if the flight is a good flight, then it's because of luck. And if the flight is a bad flight, it's also because of luck. You have no participation in that flight whatsoever. And yes, luck does exist, but your flight does not depend on luck at all. It depends on the pilots, it depends on you. You can make a change to the flight. And so you can say, oh, but I'm flying with my instructor and he knows absolutely everything that he has to do. Or I'm with my captain. If he or she is completely alone in the cabin, it's completely irrelevant. They can do all the flight completely by themselves. I'm just here like an interior plant or something like that. But no, things are not like that. You can help. You can change the outcome of a flight with simple actions. By helping on what you need to help. Maybe you're entering bad weather and your instructor says, "Okay, I'm taking the airplane, I need you to take the communications." You have a very crucial part on that flight. Your instructor feels that he is not going to be capable of doing both things because of the state of the weather, maybe, who knows. But he is confident enough on you that you will be doing your part during that flight. So resignation is not an option. You are not helpless. You can really make the difference in the flight. So, wrapping up, these 5 hazardous attitudes can be present at any point during our flight. They can affect every pilot, no matter how old or young. And it can be very difficult for us to spot those hazardous attitudes on ourselves. But there are some phrases that we can use as a way of antidote to make sure that our decisions are not being influenced by those attitudes. Listen to the others when they are telling you that something in your behavior is a little bit off. And don't be afraid to tell other pilots the same. Let's help each other out and watch over our own backs one another. Now we are moving to the final part of this aeronautical decision-making video, which talks about self-critiques. Just so you know, you can also follow me in Instagram. The link is also below in the description. The last point I want to make about this whole theme of ADM process is self-critiques. We have already talked a good bit about everything we can do before and during the flight to make it safer, to assess ourselves, but what about after the flight? Just as you do a very good briefing before each flight, it is important as well to do a very good briefing after every flight. It doesn't matter if you flew alone or with someone else. You should always try to evaluate yourself. What did you do? And did you did it well? What can be improved and how? During the debriefing is where you can think back into the flight and evaluate your own performance. Don't be afraid to take some notes about it. Our brain is dumb and we forget a lot of things. So write down what you thought about yourself as soon as you thought it. Trust me, it will be much more easier for you to go back to it later. If you're an instructor, you have to evaluate the performance of your student as well as yours. And if you're a student, you should be doing exactly the same. Always think to evaluate both of you. Create a plan of how you both can work and improve on those things. I don't know, maybe your flight skills if you think that your landings can be better. Or your procedures during flight may be a little rusty. If you feel you are taking way too long in order to execute them. Maybe you need a little refresher of your theory, or a refresher of the manual of the airplane, if you think that you don't control the systems of it as well as you should. If you're flying alone, it could sometimes be very difficult to critique yourself. After all, this video is about self-critiques, not the critiques that maybe other people around you have about you, which can also help, by the way. But here you have a question that may help you with your own critiques to yourself. If you don't know exactly where to begin with your self-evaluation. If I were to have my check right tomorrow, with what part of the flight would I be least happy about? That also includes theory, okay? If you are asked questions before, during and after the flight, that counts as well as part of the flight. Remember that the flight doesn't start when you start the engine and it doesn't end when you turn off the engine. Did you got a clear answer from that question? Or at least a few ideas of where you can start looking? As final thoughts, if you're a student, my advice would be that you listen. Listen to what your instructor says you need to improve. With time, you will be filling yourself out. Ask him not just to teach you how to fly, but how to know yourself what you need to improve. It's not that easy to critique yourself at the very beginning, when you don't have a lot of experience. But with time, when you start learning what is a good flight and what is a bad flight for you, you can start evaluating yourself. Remember, always try to actively think what went well for you during that flight, what went wrong, and write it down to not lose any detail. take that extra step for you to determine if it was an overall good flight for you. And if you're a pilot on your early days as an instructor, my advice would be pretty similar. Just an extra thing. Remember that the more you improve yourself, the more room you give yourself to improve your students. They need you to critique and evaluate yourself, so you can be a better instructor with every flight. Learning from someone as well as teaching to someone will become very difficult when both of you have a similar or the same level of knowledge or ability for that subject. Wrapping up, self-critiques. They are good, but they can be very difficult to learn how to do. It's not always that easy to critique yourself, but make the effort and try. Try to evaluate yourself every time you can. Remember to ask yourself the question, if I were to have my check ride tomorrow, with what part of that check ride would I be least happy about? When you find a proper answer to that question, then that will be a first step to learn how to self-critique yourself properly. And so that's the end of this very long video. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or at least found it somewhat interesting, please give it a like. If you learned something new, then I'll appreciate quite a lot if you consider subscribing to the channel. And if you just feel like it, you can also follow me in Instagram. The link is also down below in the description. I upload very cool photos over there. I try to upload videos every week, mainly explaining topics that has to do in a way or another with the IFR world, but in a logical order. Also, I will probably be talking a lot about aviation and education in general, but always trying to contribute something new to you. If you have a question or an opinion about something I said during this video, or if you want to talk to me about something, please feel free to comment down below, or you can get in touch with me in Instagram. I would love to hear what you have to say. If you found this video interesting, then you should go check out the whole playlist of human factors, or maybe the complete video about risk management. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in another video. Bye!